Hello. I do love getting lost in a great big, thick book, assuming, of course, that the writing in that book is engaging enough to justify my spending hundreds and hundreds of pages with it. And there are some big books that I've read this year which I feel like do that. There is the classic The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Certainly some sections were easier to read than others. And this summer I read The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai, which has only just come out recently, and I know a lot of people are reading it. But I did find this so consistently involving, and of course I have lots and lots to say about both of these books, so I'll put links below to my full reviews of them. And the trouble with reading such a big book, of course, is that it is a giant time commitment. And so something I like to do to help encourage myself to read more big books is to set myself a reading list of really long titles to read. And I count any book that's over 500 pages as a really big book. So I picked out 5 big books to read before the end of the year. And I want to talk about why I'm so keen on these particular titles. And I would love to hear in the comments below if you have read any of these books and if you'd also encourage me to read them, or if there are any other big books that you are really looking forward to and aiming to read before the end of 2025. And the very first book I want to discuss is one that I'm reading already, that I'm already a fair chunk of the way through, which is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I think this was first published in 1986. Is that right? Yeah, 1985, 1986. And this story is an absolute Western epic classic. It follows a number of different characters, but primarily centers around 2 former Texas Rangers who are now cowboys and driving a herd of cattle with a group of other characters from Texas to Montana. And the dynamic between these 2 characters is so engaging and fun because they are really opposites of each other. And I read that Larry McMurtry was inspired by Don Quixote and the dynamic between those 2 protagonists to create these 2 characters. So there's Captain Call, who is very quiet and solitary and very work focused. And there is Gus, who is very talkative and sociable and fairly lazy. He likes to take his time with things, but there is a whole host of other really fascinating characters. And I'm really glad that there's a Wikipedia entry that lists all of the primary characters of this novel, because I refer to it every once in a while just to remind myself who is who, especially because I've got to a section of the novel where it moves to another place and a whole new group of characters. So there's a lot to keep track of, but there is so much vibrancy and life in this story, especially in the dialogue between these characters, and it's very atmospheric in the descriptions of the environment of Lonesome Dove is this kind of tiny town that is so desolate, and the descriptions of it and the life in this and the pigs that one of the characters keeps in this story. It makes it so vivid and alive. And I'm not someone that is naturally prone to Western stories. I mean, Western films. I joke with my partner a lot that, whenever if he wants to watch a Western film, I'll go out and do something else for the evening, because I tend to think of Westerns, at least the stereotype of it is that it's all very macho. It's and set in a time of place that I personally am not all that interested in. But the way he brings this story to life, I am finding so engaging, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of it and reading the entire thing. And Larry McMurtry wrote a series of books based on these characters and this environment. So if I do continue to love this, then there's lots more to read. And if you have read this and the series of books, I would love to hear what you think about it, and if it's worth reading the other books in this series. Now, I was especially keen to get to this sooner rather than later, because the Bookstagrammer Bernie last year, when he was visiting London from America, I made a video with him and his husband, and and he challenged me to read Lonesome Dove, and I hadn't done it yet, but I'm reading it now. So because I think they are planning on coming back to London in November, so I want to make sure to have finished this before they get here. The Sisters by Jonas, Hassen, Khemiri, and this is the author's very first book that he has written in English. He has written other books in Swedish, but yes, he chose to write this great big epic family story in English, and it follows three sisters who are very different from each other. They have a Tunisian mother and a Swedish father, and it follows them as they journey around the world, as they try to find themselves as individuals, and as they try to negotiate a curse which has been placed upon them. And there is also a character in this named Jonas, so I think there might be a kind of meta-fictional thing where the author or a version of the author is kind of entering into the story. And I've also read about how he's structured this book in an interesting way of using time, that at first he portrays long periods of time, and then it gets progressively shorter as the novel goes forward. It kind of reminds me of The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, if you've read that also very big book, that these sections of that book, that time in that book gets increasingly kind of squashed as the novel and story progresses forward. And I've heard really great things about this book from members of my online book club who have been reading and recommending it. And also it comes with endorsements by a lot of great authors like Isabella Hamad and K.D. Kitamura and Madeline Thien, who wrote one of my favorite books of this year, and Raven Leilani. So yeah, there's a lot of praise and excitement around this book, which has also been longlisted for the National Book Awards, and I'm so excited to get immersed in it. How to End a Story, Collected Diaries by Helen Garner, who is an Australian writer, a journalist, and a novelist. And she kept diaries, or at least these collected diaries are from the end of the 1970s to the end of the 1990s. And it follows her progression in her career as a writer, but also as a mother, and the difficulties she experienced in her relationship. And it collects a whole bunch of snippets of reflections of her daily life and experiences, from observations to writing that she is working on, to observations about other writers. And so I just kind of flipped very randomly to a certain section where she was contemplating being nominated for a particular book award, where she comments that the Children's Bach, which is a novel of hers, is shortlisted for the Victorian Premier's Award. It's a lot of money, 15 grand or so. I don't know who I'm up against, but I want this prize. And she wrote, I want this prize in italics. And then after she says, don't get too hopeful though, Helen, says M earnestly, just in case. And so someone that follows a lot of book prizes, I think it's really fun and interesting hearing about authors and their reactions to being nominated for a prize. And she goes on to say a couple of pages later, I'm more anxious about what I'll wear to the prize dinner than about whether I'll win or not. And it's also interesting, there's commentary on books that she's reading. So just the page before, she says, finished Wise Blood, which I do not understand and which began somehow to sicken me, all its characters warped and ugly, twisted with ignorance and bad motives and sin. And so, yeah, I'm really eager to follow this kind of collection of impressions and her ideas and reflections on life as she is living it. And this book has a lot of fans in a number of different writers like David Nichols and Colm Tobin, who over this summer there was a reading list of authors of what they're reading recently, and Helen Garner's book is up amongst them. And also the Australian author Charlotte Wood says that this book is entrancing. I will return to these diaries for the rest of my days. And this has been longlisted for the Baillie Gifford Prize for nonfiction. Next is another nonfiction book, which also centers around literary life. It is going to be published in mid-October, but I've been sent an advanced manuscript of it, and I think it sounds so fascinating. It is called After Oscar, The Legacy of a Scandal by Merlin, Holland. Now, Oscar Wilde, of course, is a legendary figure in literature, and he died in Paris in November 1900 after having served a prison sentence, which really broke him down. He was living in exile, and this follows his legacy going forward after his death, because there's a really big scandalous story afterwards too of how both of his sons concealed their identity, and a number of his friends were involved in court cases, and there were even impersonations of Oscar Wilde in the afterlife, as if he were speaking from beyond the grave. And Merlin Holland is in a very good position to write about Oscar Wilde's legacy, because he is Wilde's only grandson, and so he has brought together the story of his literary life going after his death, and what his writing has meant to literature, and how Oscar Wilde became a gay icon. And the fifth big book I want to read before the end of the year is The Gowkaran Tree in the Middle of Our Kitchen by Shokoofeh Azar, and I still have a manuscript of this, even though it's already been published. It came out here in the UK in June, and this is an epic story that spans 50 years in the history of modern Iran, and the story is centered around 12 children who become lost in a mysterious palace one night, and it follows the stories of what happened to these children, and explores family life, but also politics in recent history of Iran, especially focused around the Islamic Revolution in 1979 and the reverberations of that throughout the country and the many people that reside there. And I've enjoyed reading this author before, and also I should say this is translated, this has an anonymous translator to it because of the subject matter and story of it. It's so sensitive within the country of Iran itself that the translator wanted to remain anonymous. And yes, I've read a book by this author before, which I actually have here just behind me on the shelf, which is The Enlightenment of the Greengage Tree. And this, I found this such an involving, an emotional story with such beautiful writing. And this was listed for the International Booker Prize and for the Stellar Prize. So I partly want to read this because I'm eager to follow more of this author's work, but also this has a chance of being listed for next year's International Booker Prize. And especially being such a big book, it'd be good to get a head start on that, but I think it sounds like such a good story as well. So those are at least some of the big books that I want to read before the end of 2025. Like I said, I'd love to hear if you've read any of these books and what you think about them, or if there are any other books that you're looking forward to reading sooner rather than later. But I hope you're doing well and immersed in big long story yourself, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye bye.